I was lying under my old pickup, changing the oil, when my hand brushed against a little black box that could have killed me with a single tap on someone's phone. I didn't find it out on the highway, either. I found it in my own garage, right after my son had stopped by to help. I didn't shout. I didn't panic. I just wiped my hands on a rag and realized my boy wasn't trying to keep me safe. He was getting ready to erase me. And the way I exposed him, quietly, patiently, is the part nobody in my family ever saw coming. Before I go any further, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Stories like this aren't easy for an old man to share, but knowing someone out there is hearing me, it brings a kind of comfort I didn't expect. Thank you for being here. Now, let me take you back to where it all truly began. You learn plenty when you live long enough, mostly that peace doesn't announce itself. It settles quietly, like morning light spilling across an old kitchen table, or the soft whistle of a kettle warming the house. That's how my days used to start. I'd move slow down the hallway, hand brushing the wall out of habit, joints groaning their usual complaints. Then the door would open onto the porch, letting the cool air breathe some life into me. At 70, that was enough, just a deep breath, a cup of coffee warming my palms, and a quiet world that still felt familiar. Every Saturday, I kept the same ritual. Didn't matter if it snowed or rained or if my back felt like a rusted hinge. I changed the oil on my truck myself. Folks told me to let a shop handle it, but some habits stay stitched into your bones. And truthfully, a man feels useful when he keeps something running. That old pickup wasn't flashy, wasn't fast, but it listened. Machines always have. People not as much. My son, well, he wasn't a boy anymore. Married, busy, living his own life 2 towns over. We drifted the way parents and grown children do, not because anyone meant to, but because time has a way of widening the spaces between phone calls. Still, whenever he visited, I made his coffee the way he liked it. Too sweet, too pale, and pretended not to notice how he checked the time every few minutes. I didn't hold it against him. You can't force someone to stay in the moments they've outgrown, but I loved him. Lord, I did. I raised him mostly on my own after his mother passed, held him through childhood fevers, patched up scraped knees, taught him how to change a tire and shave without cutting his chin. I sold my motorcycle to pay for his books, took overtime shifts so he could go on school trips where he'd never feel left out, skipped more than a few meals so his plate would always stay full. Parents don't call those sacrifices, just love. Plain and simple. And for a long time, I believed he understood that. Life at my place was slow now, steady and predictable. I tended the small garden, mended little things around the house, kept one seat at the dining table open, just in case someone ever needed it. Evenings were the quiet kind. I'd sit by the window watching the sky settle into its evening colors. And some nights, I'd talk softly to my late wife, just enough to ease the loneliness but not enough to make it hurt. Then came that visit. The one that seemed ordinary at the time. He stopped by, said he just wanted to check on me. We walked the yard, shared a cup of too sweet coffee, and talked about nothing at all. But he spent a little too long in the garage. Said he was checking the tire pressure on my truck. 15 minutes for something that takes 2. I noticed, but I didn't question it. A father wants to believe the best in his child, even when his instincts tug at his sleeve. He hugged me on the way out, one arm light, distant. I watched his truck disappear down the road and thought the silence felt heavier than usual. Still, I didn't see the danger yet. Didn't feel the world shifting under my feet. To me, he was still my boy, the same one who used to run barefoot down the driveway laughing at everything and nothing at all. That Saturday morning began like any other. Coffee, porch, the familiar creak of my knees as I slid under the truck with my tools. A normal day. A steady day. A day I'd lived 1,000 times. I didn't know then that a small, silent device had already been placed inches from my chest. Didn't know how close I was to a truth that would tear the floor out from under me. Peace feels permanent right up until the moment it isn't. And that morning, as the light shifted across my garage floor, I was completely unaware that the life I'd built, quiet, patient, and gentle, was already cracking at the edges. But that peace was about to end. I didn't feel it coming, but it was already on its way. I didn't know it then, but that silence was the last real peace I'd feel for a long time. I still remember the exact moment it happened. Not with a bang, not with a shout, but with a soft, almost innocent sound, a quiet little click. I was lying under that pickup, flashlight tucked against my shoulder, listening to the slow drip of old oil when my fingers brushed something that had no business being there. Smooth, metal, warm. Warm meant recent. And recent meant someone had been under my truck not long before I slid under it myself. At first, I told myself it was nothing. A loose part, a forgotten tool, some stray piece of equipment I'd dropped months ago. But after 70 years and a lifetime with machines, you learn to recognize a stranger the moment they enter your world. I pulled the flashlight down and aimed it toward the frame. There it was, a small black box, no bigger than a deck of cards, hugging the metal with a heavy magnet, a tiny red light blinking like it was breathing. GPS. High grade. Professional installation. Not the kind sold to teenagers or weekend campers. No, this was the sort of device used by people who needed precision or control. I didn't panic, didn't shout, didn't even move for a moment. I just let the truth settle like dust floating through garage light. Someone had put this there. Someone who knew engines. Someone who knew my routines. Someone who had the time and confidence to crawl under my truck in my own garage without so much as a whisper. I slid out from under the pickup, sat on the edge of the creeper, and rubbed my palms on my jeans, a thinking habit I've had since I was a boy. 3 people had the spare key. Only one knew enough about vehicles to install a device that perfectly. But that wasn't the worst part. I didn't remove the tracker right away. 40 years as an engineer teaches you to observe before you touch, to gather before you act. So I took photos, angles, serial numbers, placement. My hands stayed steady, not because the moment wasn't painful, but because shock sometimes steadies your fingers when your heart begins to tremble. Only after documenting everything did I release the magnet carefully, wipe the device clean, and slip it into a plastic bag. Inside the house, I set the bag on the kitchen table and stared at it the way a man stares at a truth he isn't ready to admit. My reflection trembled against the plastic. I whispered, "Why would you do this, son?" But the room stayed still. Hours passed while I sat there with that little device glowing softly like a warning I didn't want to hear. That evening, my phone rang. It was him. "Hey, Dad," he said, voice too light, too bright. "How's your truck running?" Not, "How are you?" Not, "Did you eat today?" Just the truck. My heartbeat slowed, not from fear but from the heaviness of realization pressing down on my ribs. "I'm keeping it in the garage," I said. "Transmission's acting up." Silence. Not confusion. Something else. Something sharp. Then his voice came back, tight, strained. "What's wrong with it? Where are you taking it? Did you drive anywhere today?" 3 questions. 5 seconds. A man checking a machine, not checking on his father. I swallowed hard. Why so many questions about my truck? Silence again. Cold this time. "Careful." "I'm just worried about you," he said. But his tone, his hesitation, the way the words stumbled, they didn't sound like worry. They sounded like fear, fear that the tracker wasn't giving him the answers he wanted. When the call ended, I sat in the dark, hands clasped, my breath shaking in my chest. Not from anger, not yet, but from the quiet grief of realizing your own child is circling you like prey. The next day he called again, and again the day after that, asking about the truck. Never about me. By the 3rd call, something inside me stopped pleading, stopped hoping, stopped reaching for the version of him I thought I still knew. I finally accepted what I didn't want to see. He wasn't checking in, he was checking up, watching me, tracking me, needing to know my location because something in his plan depended on it. I set the phone on the table and stared at the blank wall while my chest went perfectly still. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. I just grew quiet inside, the kind of quiet that comes right before a storm. That's when I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't stay silent. Not this time. I didn't raise my voice, but something inside me went very, very quiet. The house felt different after that. Not haunted, just hollow in a way that made every room sound like it was listening. Even the quiet had an edge to it. The hum of the fridge, the slow tick of the hallway clock, the wind slipping under the porch door. All of it felt sharper. Like the world was reminding me that danger wasn't across town or down the road, it was tied to someone who carried my name. I kept the tracker in a drawer, wrapped in that plastic bag. But even behind wood and darkness, I swear I could feel it pulsing, like a memory that refused to die down. I stopped opening the garage door. Stopped glancing at the truck altogether. Just walked past it like it held a secret I wasn't ready to face again. The nights were worse. I'd sit at the kitchen table, hands around a mug that cooled untouched, while my reflection stared back at me from the darkened window. Sleep didn't visit. It hovered. And every time I drifted off, a single thought yanked me awake. How long had my own son been watching me? A man's heart isn't built for questions like that. It pulls you backward, into softer memories that ache when touched. I remembered him as a boy, knees skinned from riding his bike too fast, tears streaking the dust on his cheeks, running toward me with that little sob kids make when they want to be brave but still need their father's arms. I used to lift him with one hand, sit him on the workbench, clean his scrapes, and listen to him whisper, "I'm okay, Dad. I'm okay." Strange how those same words echo in a man's mind years later. Except now they felt like a lie I was telling myself. I walked through the house slowly, touching things that carried history, the scarf my wife loved, still folded neatly inside her drawer, the chair she used to sit in when she read the newspaper aloud, the photo of our boy missing his front tooth, grinning like the world belonged to him. "We gave him everything," I said quietly. No one answered. Walls never do when the truth hurts. But the pieces kept falling together whether I wanted them to or not. The day he insisted on setting up my Wi-Fi. The times he fixed my laptop while I worked in the yard. The sudden drop-in visits that felt more like inspections than moments of care. His questions about my schedule, always my schedule, never my health or my comfort. I brushed those things aside back then. Old men are easy to reassure. We want to believe the best in the children we raised from babies. But now those little moments look different. They looked like steps. Small, careful steps towards something I hadn't noticed forming. Just after midnight one night, I got up and walked to my office. Didn't turn on the light. Didn't sit. Just stood there staring at the laptop. The same laptop he once handled with such urgency. My hand hovered over the lid long enough to feel my pulse in my fingertips. Then I opened it. The screen glowed, too bright in the quiet room. I opened the system logs he had shown me months earlier, the ones he claimed would improve my security. And there it was. A remote access program, quietly running, installed half a year ago. Accessed dozens of times. He'd looked at my financial papers, my medical notes, my property files, each opened on days he hadn't been anywhere near my house. A cold ache spread through my chest, not anger, a deeper kind of sorrow. A realization that someone I loved had stepped into my life as if I were a puzzle to solve, not a father to honor. I closed the laptop gently, as though noise might break something fragile. Maybe it already had. Outside, rain began tapping the windows, small, steady, rhythmic. The kind of rain that seems to understand sadness without needing to be told. I sat in the dark living room, listening to it, letting the heaviness settle like dust across an empty shelf, not thinking, not planning, just feeling the weight of what he'd done, and the weight of what I needed to do if I wanted to stay alive. I whispered his name once, not in anger, not in blame, just disbelief, an old man trying to reconcile the boy he raised with the man who now treated him like an obstacle. And somewhere, between the rain, the quiet ache in my ribs, and the cold truth sitting in my gut, another thought finally formed. If he had already crossed this line, how much further would he go if I did nothing? The grief didn't lift. But something new rose beneath it, a slow, steady resolve. Not revenge, not fury, just survival. And survival has its own voice, calm and unshakable. I sat with that realization until the sky softened under the first hint of dawn, until the house felt less like a trap and more like a place I needed to defend. Then, finally, I whispered the truth aloud. I need to think very carefully. If you're still here, thank you. Stories like this remind me, patience isn't weakness, it's quiet strength. Some nights, I caught myself whispering his name, not in anger, but in disbelief. The morning after that long, sleepless night, I walked through the house slowly, not out of weakness, but because every step felt like it belonged to a different life. A life I had lived without knowing someone close to me was calculating my end. I made coffee I didn't drink, fed the dog more out of habit than hunger, and then I sat at the kitchen table with a blank page in front of me and a simple thought in my mind. If my own son had turned my truck into a weapon, what else had he prepared? I reached for a pen. It felt heavier than it should have. I began writing, not emotions, not memories, but facts, times, dates, patterns. All the little moments that once seemed harmless, but now held sharp edges. The Wi-Fi setup, the laptop fixes, the sudden interest in my daily routines, the tracker, the forged papers, the loan I never knew I'd taken. Every piece slid into place like a machine I wish I'd never understood. I didn't feel anger, just a tired sort of clarity, the kind a man reaches only when denial no longer feels like love but a quiet kind of suicide. Around mid-morning, I picked up the phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. A man who once trusted me to fix machines big enough to kill a careless worker. A man who didn't pry. "Tom, I need legal eyes on something," I said, steady but soft. He didn't ask why. Old friends don't. He just said, "Bring whatever you have, and Franck, be careful." I hung up and stared at my notes. The more truth I wrote, the more another thought rose inside me. Not loud, not dramatic, but absolute. If I confronted my son too early, I might not leave that conversation alive. This wasn't rage. This was mathematics. A simple equation. Desperation plus debt kill switch. A father who needed a plan. So I moved gently, the way a man does when he knows someone is studying his every step. I drove to town but avoided the usual route, taking the long way through back roads covered in frost and quiet. And for the first time in my life, I checked the mirrors not for traffic, but for danger wearing a familiar face. At the hardware store, I bought 4 small cameras. Nothing fancy, just enough to watch the house without being watched back. The cashier didn't look twice at me. Most folks don't suspect an old man buying surveillance equipment. Back home, I walked the property slowly. Measured corners with my eyes, found good hiding spots, places that wouldn't catch the sun or draw a curious glance. One in the bookshelf, one near the porch, one behind a picture frame, one facing the driveway where a man's expression can't hide from the truth. As I worked, a strange calm settled in my chest. Like I'd stepped into a role I never wanted but understood all too well. I placed each camera carefully, testing angles, testing sound, testing how the house looked through the eyes of a witness rather than a home. Then I opened the laptop I'd bought just that morning, a clean machine with no fingerprints from my son. I connected each camera one by one. Their silent feeds filled the screen like 4 small windows into the truth I would need very soon. I sat back and let the weight of it settle. For months, he'd been watching me. Now, quietly, I was watching him too. I didn't like the feeling. Didn't feel triumphant or clever. Just necessary. Like tightening a loose bolt before it kills someone down the line. Later that afternoon, I called a second number. Another old friend, not one for small talk. "Marcus," I said softly. "Someone's trying to take my life apart. I need help taking it back." He exhaled slowly. "You finally calling about your boy?" he asked. My silence answered for me. He didn't judge, didn't scold, just said, "I'll run the financials, check the loans, check who he's tied up with. Give me 12 hours. When I hung up, I felt the smallest shift inside me, a steadying, a sense that I wasn't walking blind anymore. I reviewed the footage, checked the driveway again, tightened the curtain cords. Sometimes revenge isn't fire or fury. Sometimes it's preparation, a quiet stacking of facts until the truth becomes undeniable. Somewhere in that long stretch of afternoon, I whispered the title phrase to myself without even realizing it. My own son turned my truck into a weapon. Saying it aloud made the air feel heavier, but it also gave me strength. Naming a truth is the first step toward surviving it. When the sun began to fall behind the ridge of pines, I closed the notebook, put my glasses down, and breathed deeper than I had in days. Everything was set, every piece in its place, every angle covered, every lie ready to be exposed. Now I just had to wait for him to walk into the truth with his own footsteps. The stage was set. All I had to do was wait. They had no idea that silence can build walls stronger than any spoken warning. He arrived just before 9, the exact time I'd told him. Funny how a guilty man is never late to the moment he thinks he can talk his way out of. I watched his truck roll up the drive, tires crunching softly over the gravel, a familiar sound wrapped in unfamiliar fear. For a moment I saw the boy he once was, the kid who used to jump from that same truck with a lunchbox and a grin. But when he stepped out now, his shoulders hunched, eyes darting like a man checking exits before a storm hits. He wasn't alone. She came with him, the one who always spoke with sweetness in her voice and calculation in her eyes. I didn't open the door right away. Let them stand there in the quiet. Let the morning air tighten the truth around them. Finally, I turned the handle. The house stayed still, the cameras watching every angle. Just you, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Truth doesn't shout. She tried to push her way in anyway. For people like her, boundaries are only suggestions. But I held the frame with one hand and met her stare with the steadiness of a man who'd buried too many lies to fear one more. This is between a father and his son, I said calmly. Not you. She opened her mouth to argue. He touched her arm, lightly, nervously. Let's just go inside, he whispered. Strange how guilt makes even confident voices shake like thin glass. They sat on the couch, close enough that their knees brushed, like two people clinging to the hope that whatever I knew was less than what they feared. I took the old leather chair across from them, the one that used to rock when my wife read beside the fire. This morning, it didn't move. It held me steady as if the house itself had chosen a side. He drew in a breath. Dad, what's this about? I didn't waste time. I didn't need drama. Just the truth laid gently between us. I found something under my truck. Silence cracked through the room like a small, clean bone snapping. A tracker, I said, professionally installed. His face drained of color, not shock, not confusion, recognition. She shifted beside him, legs crossed, eyes narrowed. Fingers tightening around her purse, the way a person grips a lie that's fraying at the edges. You taught me to work on engines, I continued. Taught me to spot bad wiring, cheap magnets, and the kind of device made for more than watching. He swallowed hard. The cameras caught every movement. She tried to speak for him. Why would he ever... $320,000, I said softly. Her mouth snapped shut. His eyes closed. A tremor passed through his hands. Money tells the truth even when people don't. You owe it, I said. Not to a bank, not to a friend, to the kind of men who don't ask twice. His voice cracked. Dad, listen. I know about the forged signature. I kept my tone even. The power of attorney attempt. The spyware on my computer. The tracker. The loan using my land. Every word landed quietly. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't need volume to break someone open. He covered his face with both hands. She stiffened beside him, eyes moving too fast, calculating escape routes in a room with only one door. You turned my truck into something you could shut down while I was driving, I said. Did you know that? Did you know it could kill a man before he ever saw the hazard lights? His head jerked up. No, Dad, I swear. She said it was just a GPS, just a way to keep track, just... She cut him off. Stop talking. He didn't. For the first time in months, my son chose me over her fear. I installed it, he said, tears clinging to his eyelashes. I accessed your laptop. I knew about the papers. I knew about the loan. I didn't want to hurt you. I just didn't know what else to do. His voice cracked apart, piece by piece. She hissed his name, but it was too late. His confession sat between us, raw and trembling. And that's when I spoke the quiet line I had carried for days. I'm sorry, too. I turned my gaze toward the kitchen. Agent Fields, I said gently. I think you've heard enough. They stepped out silently. Two agents, badges out, calm, steady. The way justice enters when you've done all you can to stay alive. My son didn't run, didn't argue, didn't lift his hands except to let them take him. She screamed, blamed me. Cursed the house, the sky, my name. But I didn't answer. Some storms don't deserve a voice. As they guided him out the door, he looked back at me, a long, broken stare that carved itself into my ribs. I didn't wave, didn't cry, didn't move. And in that silence, I finally felt free. Sometimes the loudest moment in a man's life is the one where he says nothing at all. Spring came late that year. Cold mornings lingered, and the ranch carried a quiet that felt different from the months before. Not the silence of fear, but the silence that comes after a long storm finally moves on. By then, the courts had spoken. The papers were filed. The consequences were real, and I was left with something no judge could hand me. A life I still had the chance to live. I'd sit on the porch most mornings, Scout curled at my feet, watching the light stretch across the pasture the same way it had for decades. Yet everything felt changed, not worse, not better, just truer. The wounds my son left behind didn't vanish. They settled, like old scars that stop hurting but never quite fade. I kept his last letter tucked inside my desk, the one where he wrote about therapy, about learning how far he'd fallen, about the guilt he carried like a stone in his chest. He didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't plead, just told the truth in a way I wish he'd done years earlier. Sometimes I reread it. Sometimes I can't. Healing isn't a straight road, more like a long country path with soft places and sharp turns. But I do know this. The day I realized my own son turned my truck into a weapon was the day I understood that survival isn't cruelty. It's choosing to keep living even when the people you love make choices you can't understand. I don't hate him. Hate is heavy, and I've carried enough weight in my life. Maybe one day we'll talk again. Maybe not. Some bridges can be rebuilt. Others become memorials of what once was. Either way, I wake up each morning grateful for one simple truth. I'm still here. Still breathing. Still living on my land with the kind of peace you earn only after learning how fragile life can be. If there's a lesson in all this, it's simple. Listen to your instincts. Protect your dignity. And remember, self-preservation isn't selfish. It's a kind of love you learn late but never forget. Maybe justice isn't loud or fast. Maybe it's simply being able to sleep in peace again. If this story touched you, tell me, would you have done the same in my place? And if you'd like to hear more stories spoken from the heart, feel free to subscribe.